The name Ponzi is synonymous with financial fraud, representing the ultimate cautionary tale about greed, gullibility, and reckless ambition. Yet the man behind the infamous Ponzi scheme, Charles Ponzi, was a hapless dreamer with a scant understanding of finance or long-term strategy. His story is a mix of outrageous cunning, staggering incompetence, and a fascinating insight into human nature. The early years, ambition without direction. Born Carlo Pietro Giovanni Guglielmo Tebaldo Ponzi on March 3, 1882, in Lugo, Italy, Ponzi grew up in a modest household. Despite his family's lack of wealth, Ponzi dreamed of living extravagantly. In 1903, he immigrated to the United States with grand aspirations but little preparation. Initially, Ponzi struggled. He worked as a dishwasher, waiter, and clerk, but his knack for making enemies and his lack of financial discipline often left him unemployed. His early years in America were marked by failure, debts, and minor scams. At one point, he served time in a Canadian prison for forging checks and in another for smuggling Italian immigrants into the United States. The origins of the Ponzi scheme. Ponzi's moment of accidental infamy began in 1919, when he stumbled upon a seemingly minor inefficiency in the international postal system. He learned about international reply coupons, IRCS, certificates that could be exchanged for postage in different countries. Due to currency fluctuations after World War I, Ponzi noticed that IRCs purchased in some countries were significantly cheaper than their redemption value in others. Theoretically, Ponzi could buy IRCs in a country with a weak currency, redeem them in a stronger economy, and pocket the difference. However, this arbitrage required significant logistical coordination and capital, neither of which Ponzi had. Instead of executing the plan, Ponzi used it as a facade for an entirely different operation. The scam unfolds. Ponzi launched the Securities Exchange Company in 1920, promising investors jaw-dropping returns of 50% in 45 days or 100% in 90 days. This was far higher than the 5.6% annual returns from banks at the time. Ponzi claimed he could deliver these profits by exploiting the IRC arbitrage opportunity. But in reality, no such large-scale transactions ever occurred. Instead, Ponzi used the hallmark method of a classic pyramid scheme. He paid earlier investors with money from new ones. As word of the extraordinary returns spread, money poured in from all directions. By mid-1920, Ponzi was raking in up to $250,000 per day, equivalent to over $3 million per day in today's money. The rise of a financial genius. Charles Ponzi's rise to fame was swift and astonishing. In less than a year, he transformed from an obscure immigrant with a questionable past into a household name. Newspapers of the time lionized him as a financial visionary, dubbing him the Wizard of Finance. His charm and confidence captivated both the press and the public, who eagerly bought into his promises of extraordinary wealth. Ponzi's newfound fortune enabled him to adopt a life of unprecedented luxury. He purchased a grand mansion in Lexington, Massachusetts, complete with opulent furnishings and elaborate gardens. Ponzi was frequently seen wearing tailored suits, flashing expensive jewelry, and chauffeuring around town in a custom-designed luxury car. His generosity was equally theatrical. He showered his wife, Rose, with extravagant gifts and even repaid old debts to past acquaintances to bolster his reputation as an honorable businessman. The spectacle of Ponzi's success added fuel to the frenzy. Crowds gathered daily outside his office, clutching their life savings in hopes of doubling them within weeks. His charisma and apparent mastery of the market turned skepticism into adulation, with some mortgaging their homes or liquidating family heirlooms to invest. Ponzi embodied the American dream at its most seductive, a self-made man turning rags into riches, with promises to share the wealth with anyone daring enough to follow him. Yet, beneath this gilded facade, the reality was far less glamorous. Ponzi never executed the complex arbitrage involving international reply coupons, IRCs, that he touted as the source of his success. The logistics of his claimed scheme, buying and redeeming IRCs at scale, were virtually impossible. Instead, Ponzi relied on a simple, unsustainable principle: using funds from new investors to pay off earlier ones. He neither reinvested the funds nor kept any semblance of proper financial records, leaving the entire operation teetering on the edge of collapse. As word of his extraordinary returns spread, money poured in faster than ever, but so did the liabilities. By the summer of 1920, Ponzi's obligations to investors had ballooned to $15 million, equivalent to over $200 million today. The mounting debt was a financial tsunami in the making, its eventual crash inevitable. The collapse. By July 1920, cracks began to appear in Ponzi's carefully crafted empire. Skeptics among journalists and financial analysts started questioning the feasibility of his claims. A few brave reporters calculated the total number of IRCs required to sustain Ponzi's promised returns and discovered a glaring impossibility. There simply weren't enough IRCs in circulation globally to support the operation. This revelation cast a shadow of doubt over Ponzi's scheme. Simultaneously, federal authorities launched an investigation into Ponzi's business practices. Banks grew wary, and some froze his accounts, compounding his cash flow issues. Rumors began to spread, causing panic among investors. Crowds of people who just weeks earlier had idolized Ponzi now swarmed his office, demanding their money back. On August 11, 1920, the inevitable happened. Unable to keep up with withdrawal requests, Ponzi's scheme imploded. While he owed investors over $7 million, his accounts held a mere $61 in liquid funds. The man who had promised to make everyone rich had been exposed as an illusionist whose magic relied on deception and the gullibility of the crowd. Aftermath and legacy. Charles Ponzi's fall from grace was as dramatic as his meteoric rise. Following the collapse of his scheme, Ponzi faced the wrath of betrayed investors, public scorn, and the full weight of the law. He served multiple prison sentences in the United States for mail fraud, totaling over 14 years. His charisma, which had once enthralled thousands, could no longer shield him from justice. After his final release in 1934, Ponzi was deported to Italy, where he attempted to revive his fortune through a series of ill-fated ventures. Among these was a bizarre scam involving a Brazilian airline that never took flight, literally or figuratively. Each attempt only further showcased Ponzi's inability to learn from his failures or devise schemes with any real substance. By the time of his death in 1949, Ponzi was a destitute and forgotten man, earning a living as a translator in a Rio de Janeiro charity hospital. His passing was marked by little fanfare, a stark contrast to the headlines that had once celebrated him as a financial prodigy. Yet, Ponzi's influence far outlived him. His name became immortalized in the financial lexicon, with the term Ponzi scheme now serving as shorthand for any fraudulent investment operation reliant on recruiting new investors to pay earlier ones. Financial regulators, educators, and fraud investigators have since used Ponzi's story as a cautionary tale, underscoring the dangers of greed and unchecked ambition. The idiot savant of scams. What makes Charles Ponzi's story so compelling isn't just the magnitude of his fraud, but the sheer recklessness and incompetence that defined it. Despite his ability to captivate and persuade, Ponzi was hopelessly out of his depth when it came to managing the operation he had built. He never devised a realistic strategy to invest the funds entrusted to him, nor did he attempt to build a legitimate business model. Ponzi's scheme lacked even the semblance of sustainability. He maintained no accurate records, had no contingency plans, and made no effort to conceal the glaring flaws in his operation. He was in many ways his own worst enemy. His bravado and blind belief in his ability to indefinitely defy reality were as much to blame for his downfall as the public's credulity. Ponzi's legacy is a testament to the dual-edged sword of charisma and ambition. While he lacked the intellect and discipline of a true financial mastermind, his ability to inspire belief in others was extraordinary. His story remains a sobering reminder that behind every glittering promise of untold riches, there may lurk a ticking time bomb. Lessons for the modern era. Ponzi's story remains relevant today. Modern financial frauds like Bernie Madoff's infamous scheme are essentially sophisticated versions of Ponzi's rudimentary scam. The critical elements, unsustainable promises, reliance on new investors, and human gullibility are the same. For investors, the lessons are clear. 1. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. 2. Trust but verify. 3. Understand what you're investing in. For regulators and governments, Ponzi's saga highlights the importance of vigilant oversight to protect the public from schemes that prey on their trust and aspirations. In the end, Charles Ponzi was not a financial genius, but a tragicomic figure, an incompetent dreamer who stumbled into infamy. His story serves as both a warning and a reminder of the enduring appeal of easy money and the disastrous consequences of chasing it. Enjoyed the content? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment to share your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Your support means the world.